Hello folks, I'm Esther Emery. I'm the homestead wife over at Fauchematic Off-Grid. But today you're on my personal channel and it's a Thursday, so we're just gonna hang out. Someone messaged me to the effect of that we were gonna have tea together on Thursday mornings because this person has tea while listening to me, and I thought, why do I not bring my own tea? Am I crazy? It's getting chilly. And here I am in my garden wanting to have a conversation with my friends, so I finally wised up and brought my own cup of tea. Today's talk is in debt to and inspired by a friend of mine named Kelly Nikandeha, who's in conversation with me on the subject of hope. She's working on a future book project which will involve some conversation about this word and also the subject matter of community development and some scriptural support for that in a Christian context. But she's been challenging me and encouraging me, inspiring really, around the idea of hope in ways that are giving me some perspective on my own experiences. Which brings me to my subject matter here, sitting in my off-grid life, my theoretically intentional life in which I strive to be the best person that I can be and to live as freely as I can and to do the things that give me the most power to be compassionate in the world and the most power to be a healthy person who contributes to the health of larger systems and communities. There's a fascinating point, the point at the birth of hope, the beginning of hope, where horizons really do shift and perspectives shift. And that's something that I experience a great deal of in my off-grid or intentional life, and it's something that I pursue on purpose. You know, it's a very valid question to ask me or my husband half the time, why do we do the things we do? It seems like we don't have any particular map that we follow exactly. Sometimes we use contemporary technology and sometimes we don't. Sometimes we go to the grocery store and sometimes we don't. Sometimes we connect to systems that we may also find fault with, and sometimes we boycott completely. So what is the roadmap that we're following through there? And I think that the map, the direction that maximizes our capacity for hope is actually a fair description of our intentions. And let me explain, let me be clear about this. So at one point in my life, I had a lot of information that would be incriminating in regards to our food supply. So let's say, just for the purposes of conversation, that I had a perception that certain elements of our food supply were lacking in integrity, okay? So not only are there effects on the end user, which are possibly bad for my health, but I'm aware of the process by which this food is coming to me. There are consequences for the soil, for the earth itself, for animals, for the health and happiness of animals, the care of the world, and certainly other human beings. There are these marks of damage at various levels as food is coming to me, such that when it comes to me, it doesn't have integrity or health to it. And I'm aware of this. But I, for years of my life, have absolutely nothing I can do about it. Nothing I can do about it. I don't see that there's anything that can be done. A person has to eat, right? And what am I going to do? Start my own farm? Grow my own food? I know from the comments that we receive on our Fauchematic videos that a lot of you have experienced what I'm going to try to talk about here. A lot of you have experienced that moment when you didn't know how to do something, and then you do. Or you didn't think something was possible, and then it is. Or you felt backed into a corner and trapped and unable to do what needed to be done to have health or to be able to care for yourself or to be able to care for each other. And then a door opens, you go through, things become possible. I know that you have had those experiences because you tell them about us. Tell them to us. For me, there was one single cucumber. It was the funniest thing because although I'm still actually by some standards a beginner gardener, but much more comfortable with gardening now, I used to think I had a black thumb. I used to think I couldn't grow anything. My sister bought me 4 cucumber plants, and she told me exactly where to plant them. And 3 of them were bitten through within the first week. 3 of the stems were bitten through within the first week. I had no faith in those cucumber plants. And in fact, even although I did water that one remaining cucumber plant, even though I did take care of it, it didn't seem all summer long like it was going to do a darn thing. Until the end of August, I saw on that cucumber plant 1 cucumber. And I still laugh at how much that cucumber meant to me. How much it meant to me about potential and possibility. And how much the literal horizons that it opened up for me in terms of my capacity to be involved in my food supply, such that I could perhaps have influence on this whole system, which I was very unhappy with, but also had the perception that I couldn't change. But what I didn't realize when I ate that single cucumber, when I cut it up into a cucumber salad and served it on my son's birthday, is that I would be then accountable to that discovery. The discovery of hope is also a discovery of personal responsibility as soon as you realize that you can change things. And that realization meets your desire to change things, to live a more pure, more just, more right kind of life. Then, because now you have to. So an interesting thing that I've been thinking about is, to what extent do I keep myself free of hope? To what extent do I build obstacles to hope so that I don't have to realize the potential for transformation? And with that perspective, maybe it'll make a little more sense how Nick and I move through things. We aren't necessarily doing the things that are going to get us points. I mean, I don't even know what the point system is. I know another homesteader who wants to make a t-shirt that there's no award for the homesteadiest person. Because it certainly is easy to think that there is some kind of a point system. And if I have the cistern, and if I have the water, and I have the solar power, and I have chickens who reproduce, then I will have checked off this list of things that a person needs to be living an intentional life. But I'd rather measure by hope. I'd rather measure by our capacity to feel hopeful and feel responsibility. And I would rather measure by an intersection between personal health and capacity to be kind and compassionate. So when I think about how that first crisis for me really was about the food supply. It really was about food. My first crisis was, I am only able to eat food that is not only harmful to me, but it's been harmful to other living beings along the way. And I don't have any other options about what I eat, right? Well, twist that, turn that, and say, okay, so maybe I do have some other options, as long as I'm willing to hoe my own row and carry my own shovel. The options are limitless. We've had a lot more moments like that here on our off-grid property. Another one that comes to mind is the time that my husband was out of town, and another one that comes to mind is when my husband was out of town, and I, at that point, didn't have communication with the outside world, and I had the kids by myself. And I think many of you have heard my story of having the bear come while that was happening, and it was very discouraging and in fact somewhat traumatic. But I may not have told you about my successes in that same context. One time when the spring pump was frozen and I had to unfreeze it with warm water and a washcloth, and was really concerned that I was going to break it and not have water until Nick got home. And I managed to navigate that and felt a huge burst of satisfaction and hope after that moment. Another was when the front door of the yurt was locked and I didn't have the keys, and I ended up having to use a crochet hook and a hammer to hammer the pin out of the hinges. People think that it's not good that our doors hinge out, but I'm really glad that they do, because I had access to that hinge pin. I was able to get the kids and I inside so I could build a fire on that day that I locked us out of the yurt. And that also was a huge burst of hope. So for me, there's this circle that I go through, right? Where action produces hope and hope necessitates action. And that's kind of what Nick and I are doing when we think about this wheel that we're going on, trying to decide which project to do next, and also, more importantly, where we make our compromises. Because if we take on too much responsibility, if we take on more than we're capable of, then we lose hope because we're overwhelmed and unhappy. And you can see that in choices like ending up putting drywall in the house, or deciding to do only the main level garden this summer rather than trying to fight the elk for the lower levels of the terraces. But also, we've been in the other situation too. We've also been in the place where we're not doing enough. And so there isn't hope because we're feeling complacent, or we're feeling too confined to our limitations. So for an example of that would be my first year here, I didn't feel like I could bake the bread in the wood-fired oven. I know none of you believe that now because I've gotten so good at it, but when I first was working with a wood-fired oven, I burned everything. And so I thought, okay, well, I'll just buy store bread, and that'll be my compromise. Well, I bought store bread for a while. And then I realized I had been buying store bread for too long, and I needed to challenge myself. So I find that I can, using hope as a goal, or you might say inspiration or potential as a goal, I can use that as a way to make decisions as I'm trying to find my way through what might otherwise seem to be a thicket of choices that may seem to have no rhyme or reason in the way we're making them. Someone left a comment here the other day saying that I am so much more than the homestead wife. And I had to laugh because yes, absolutely. But also that's my point. I think that the idea that being a compassionate and caring person, even to the extent of being a full-time homemaker and caretaker, is somehow not compatible with being a person of influence or a person of intelligence, that's just a pile of horse manure. It just isn't true at all. And I think that idea comes from the worst parts of our kind of human tendencies. For example, the idea that the most violent is the most powerful, or the idea that we've got elk back there. Are you hearing the elk bugle? The idea that the most violent are the most powerful, or that success involves separating yourself from being compassionate or a caretaker. I think that these values definitely play out in elements of our culture, but they aren't the values that I choose. They aren't the values that I choose to uphold. They aren't the map by which I'm trying to lead my life. So instead, I am chasing hope. I'm looking for hope. I'm moving myself both through action and through rest, through inspiration and through humility, in order to find the path that drives me towards the greatest sense of potential for good, knowing even then that I am more and more accountable to my perceptions, the cost of hope. I'm Esther Emery. Thanks for watching today. I'll see you next week. It's perfect, honey.